He used to promise her the same thing every night before bed. "Just a few more years, Helen, then we'll rest. Then we'll finally live." Every morning, he'd leave before the sun rose. Every evening, she'd wait at the window, lights dim, tea gone cold, smiles still soft. For decades, that routine became their quiet ritual of hope. He told her that patience would be their reward, that the long days apart would make their final years together sweeter. He believed in the dream of one day. But time didn't wait for their plans. And when that one day finally came, she wasn't there to see it. For most of his life, Richard Hale believed in one thing, that love could wait for success. He wasn't a bad husband. In fact, he was the kind that always meant well. Every decision he made, every hour of overtime, every business trip, every late-night spreadsheet, was, in his mind, for her. For Helen. They married young, in a small town with narrow streets and slow mornings. Their first apartment was tiny, one bedroom, a leaky faucet, and a balcony overlooking the street. But it was alive. There were always books stacked unevenly, the smell of coffee in the air, and her laughter, the kind that filled even the smallest corners of space. In those early years, time felt endless. They didn't count days by deadlines, but by moments, by conversations, by warmth. But then came the promotion. The kind of opportunity people spend lifetimes waiting for. And with it came a simple phrase. "Just a few years, Helen. Let me build something solid. Then we'll rest." He meant it. Every word. He wanted to give her the life she deserved, the house she dreamed of, the comfort she never asked for but always appreciated. So he worked. And the years began to shift. The apartment turned into a house. The laughter at breakfast became phone calls at lunch. The balcony conversations turned into voicemails left unanswered. Helen never complained. She believed him when he said it was temporary. She filled the quiet with small joys, gardening, teaching, caring for neighbors. She became the stillness that balanced his storms. Every morning, she'd wave from the gate as he drove off in his silver sedan. And every evening, she'd sit by the window, the same chair, same teacup, same look of patient faith. He always told her he'd be home early. He rarely was. The calendar turned, birthdays missed, anniversaries postponed, dinners promised. Next weekend. And yet, she never stopped preparing his favorite meal, never stopped believing in that future they'd built in words. When he finally reached his mid-50s, Richard looked around and saw everything he'd worked for, a large house, 2 cars, a company that respected his name. But Helen's hair had turned gray, and her voice had grown softer. She still smiled when he walked in, still poured his tea just right. But behind her eyes was something he didn't recognize at first, a quiet kind of distance. Not anger, not disappointment, just time, stretching between them like an ocean. She once said softly, almost to herself, "You know, Rich, I think we keep waiting for life to start. But I think it's been happening all along." He didn't respond. He just smiled, the same way people do when they don't want to understand something yet. And so he kept working. Because to him, love was something you earned, not something you paused for. He couldn't see it then. But every day he spent building their future, he was quietly leaving her behind in the present. It happened on a Thursday, the day Helen stopped waiting at the window. Richard remembered it vividly, though he wished he didn't. The sky that morning was pale and heavy, the kind of sky that warns of rain before it falls. He had an early meeting scheduled, one of those that couldn't be missed. She had asked him, just the night before, to stay home for breakfast. "Just this once," she'd said with a small smile. But he had smiled back, kissed her on the forehead, and promised, "When I retire, Helen, then we'll have breakfast every morning." He didn't see the sadness in her eyes when he said it. He didn't hear the weight behind her silence as he closed the door. That afternoon, in the middle of his meeting, his phone buzzed. A local number. The hospital. By the time he reached her, the light in the room had already changed. It had that muted, filtered quality that comes only when something irreversible has passed. The doctor's words were quiet, careful. But Richard barely heard them. He just saw Helen lying there, still and small, her hand pale against the white sheet. He reached for her hand, whispering her name, once, twice, as if repetition could undo what time had done. But the room remained silent. For the first time in decades, there was no clock ticking in the background, no schedule pulling him forward. Just the echo of everything he didn't say. The funeral came and went like a dream, too organized, too efficient. People spoke about her kindness, her patience, her laughter. Richard stood still, hearing their words but not feeling them. Every compliment about her became a quiet accusation against him. He realized then how much of her life he had only seen in fragments. Moments between his workdays, seconds between deadlines. The neighbors talked about how she used to tend their gardens, how she'd read to their children, how her home always smelled like lavender and tea. He hadn't noticed any of it. His life with her existed in photographs, smiling, posed, distant. When everyone left, he stood alone in the empty house. The silence felt thicker now, almost physical. The clock on the wall ticked faintly, marking each second like a heartbeat. He walked to her chair, the one by the window where she always sat. The teacup was still there, half finished, dust beginning to settle on the rim. The cushion carried the faint shape of her presence. And in that stillness, he said the words he never thought he'd say. "I'm home, Helen. Just like I promised." But promises mean nothing when time has already left. That night, he opened the folder labeled Retirement Plans. Inside were brochures for seaside homes, travel itineraries, notes scribbled in her handwriting. Visit Italy in spring. Take the train through Scotland. No phones. Just us. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume. He ran his hand over the words, and something inside him broke quietly, not loud enough to shatter, just enough to change shape forever. He had built a life for their tomorrow, but she had lived hers waiting for today. And now, there was no one left to share the reward he'd spent a lifetime earning. He had promised her forever. But forever isn't measured in years, it's measured in mornings you don't skip, and moments you don't postpone. In the weeks after Helen's death, the house became a museum, perfectly preserved, painfully silent. Richard couldn't bring himself to move anything. Her sweater still hung by the door. Her gardening gloves still sat on the back porch, soil hardened inside their palms. Even her slippers rested neatly beneath the chair by the window, as if she'd simply stepped away for a moment and would return. But she didn't. And the silence, once bearable, began to grow. The mornings were the hardest. For 30 years, he'd left before sunrise, always too busy to notice how the world sounded at dawn. Now, he heard everything, the creak of the house, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the emptiness between sounds. He'd make coffee out of habit, pour 2 cups, then stare at the second one until it went cold. He didn't know what to do with the stillness she left behind. It wasn't just grief, it was disorientation. For decades, his life had a purpose. Wake, work, provide. Repeat. Now there was no next thing. No meeting, no deadline, no reason to rush. He had finally arrived at the rest he had promised. But without her, rest felt like exile. He tried to keep busy at first. Organized her things. Sorted documents. Cleaned out drawers. But every object carried her in it, faint traces of handwriting, her perfume lingering on envelopes, her name written beside his on every bill. He found a small box in her nightstand, tucked neatly behind her books. Inside were folded letters, unsent, all addressed to him. Each one written in different years. He read the first one, written when she was 40. "You work so hard, Rich. I know you do it for us. But sometimes I miss the man who used to talk to me, not just plan for me." He read the next. "You say we'll travel one day. But I think maybe the best trip we could take is just to walk together again." And the last one, dated just 2 months before she passed. "If I go before you, please don't wait for retirement to start living. There's so much world left for you to see, even if you see it alone." He folded the letter carefully, tears soaking the ink until her words blurred. For the first time in his life, he realized how long she had known the truth, that love doesn't wait for free time. It only lives in time shared. Days turned into weeks. The garden outside began to wither, the one she had tended so carefully every morning. One afternoon, he stepped outside with her gloves in his hands. The air smelled faintly of rain, the soil soft beneath his feet. He knelt, hands trembling, and began pulling weeds the way she used to. He didn't know what he was doing, but somehow, it didn't matter. He wasn't fixing something. He was remembering. As he dug his hands into the soil, something inside him began to shift. He realized how long it had been since he touched the world, really touched it. Everything he'd done for years had been abstract, numbers, plans, forecasts. Now, for the first time, his hands were dirty, and he felt human. He spent hours there, replanting flowers she once loved. Lavender, daisies, the small pink roses she called hopeful things. By evening, he was covered in soil, exhausted, but strangely alive. The garden didn't look perfect, but it looked real. That night, as he sat on the porch watching the sky turn gold, he realized something he never said to her. "I didn't just lose you, Helen. I lost the years I refused to live with you." The words fell quietly into the air, carried by wind and memory. Weeks later, he retired officially. No fanfare. No ceremony. Just a letter signed, a key turned in an office door. When he left the building, he stood in the parking lot for a long time, watching other men rush past him, briefcases in hand, faces lit by phone screens. He recognized himself in every one of them. Ambitious. Proud. Blind. For decades he had believed that success was the way to prove love. Now he understood, it had been the way he avoided it. He drove home slowly that day. No calls, no music, just the steady hum of the road beneath the car. When he reached the house, the light was fading, that same amber hue she had loved so much. He walked into the living room, stood by the window where she used to wait, and whispered into the empty air. "I'm done working, Helen. We can rest now." The silence answered, not with words, but with peace. He had spent a lifetime building a future for two. But when the future finally came, there was only one left to live it. The weeks after retirement blurred into one another. The structure that had once anchored Richard's life, the morning alarm, the rush to the car, the constant hum of purpose, was gone. At first, he thought he'd enjoy the quiet. He had imagined long mornings, slow breakfasts, the newspaper folded neatly beside him, and the freedom to do anything he wanted. But the truth was, he didn't know what he wanted anymore. Every dream he'd ever had was built on someday. And someday had finally arrived, alone. He started walking in the mornings, tracing the same path Helen used to take through the park behind their home. The trees had grown taller, their branches heavier, their shadows longer. He noticed the bench where she used to rest, the one with the small brass plaque she'd once joked she'd earned by sitting there too often. Now, the bench bore her name. A small, simple inscription. For Helen, who never stopped waiting. He stood there for a long time. The morning air was cold, his breath visible. He placed his hand on the plaque, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was giving you everything," he said. "But I was really keeping you waiting for nothing." A jogger passed by, giving him a polite nod. Richard nodded back, but his mind was far away, tracing the invisible years that had slipped through his fingers like sand. He began revisiting old photographs. Their first apartment, their wedding, the summer they drove to the coast in a car that barely made it back. He studied each picture like a relic, noticing things he had once overlooked. The way her hand always found his. The way she looked at him even when he wasn't looking back. It struck him then, the measure of a life wasn't what he built, but what he missed. And in every photograph, he saw the same truth. She was always present, while he was always preoccupied. One evening, he sat by the fireplace and opened his old journals, ledgers filled with financial notes, business goals, investment plans. Every line, every page, mapped a journey toward security. Yet not once did he write about joy. Not once about laughter. Not once about her. He realized something quietly devastating. He had kept records of every dollar earned, but none of the moments that had made earning them worthwhile. His wealth was real, but it was measured in absence. That night, he couldn't sleep. The house felt too still, too wide, too hollow. He rose, walked into the garden barefoot, and stood among the flowers he had replanted. The air was damp, the earth cool beneath his feet. Above him, the stars shone, faint, scattered, but constant. He imagined her there, somewhere among them, smiling softly the way she used to when he said something unintentionally sweet. And for the first time in years he spoke to her as if she were beside him. "I used to think I was working for us. But I think now. I was working to avoid losing control. Because love, real love, demands that we stop building and start being. And I wasn't brave enough for that." A breeze passed through the garden, bending the flowers slightly toward him. He took it as her answer. Days later he began writing. Not reports. Not plans. But letters, the kind Helen used to write him and never send. Each one started the same way. "Dear Helen, today I did something small." One day, it was cooking her favorite soup, the one he used to say took too long. Another day, it was sitting on the porch and listening to the wind instead of checking his phone. He started describing these little moments, planting new seeds, repairing a broken birdhouse, talking to the neighbors he'd barely acknowledged in 30 years. With every letter, he felt a little more alive. A little more like the man she believed he could be. Months passed. The garden flourished again, brighter, fuller, somehow more alive than before. Neighbors would stop by, complimenting how beautiful it looked. He'd smile and say, "It's hers. I'm just keeping it company." Sometimes he imagined her sitting beside him, her hands folded on her lap, smiling at how the roses had taken over the corner fence. He would talk to her softly, like she was just listening quietly, not gone, just resting in a different kind of presence. He no longer avoided the silence. He listened to it. Because in that silence, he began to hear her voice, not in words, but in memory. In patience. In peace. And then one morning, while tending the garden, he found something unexpected. Beneath the soil near the roses, he discovered an old note in her handwriting, weathered and faded, wrapped in plastic. It was short. Just a single line. "If you ever find this, it means you finally slowed down enough to see what matters." He sat down, tears in his eyes, laughter breaking through the ache. It was so her, quiet, gentle, always one step ahead of his stubbornness. He looked at the sky, whispered, "I found it, Helen. I found what matters." He had spent a lifetime chasing the perfect ending, a house, a pension, a plan. But the truth is, love doesn't wait for endings. It lives in the small, ordinary hours, the morning coffee, the shared silence, the soft laughter over nothing at all. In the end, Richard didn't retire to rest. He retired to remember. And maybe that's the real cost of wealth, realizing too late that the richest moments were never in the future, they were already spent. Richard lived the rest of his days in quiet routine, not the kind built on deadlines, but the kind shaped by peace. He still woke up early, but not to rush anywhere. He made coffee for two, even though only one cup was ever used. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was remembrance. He'd placed the second cup near the window, the same spot where she used to wait for him. The sunlight would touch it softly every morning, as if acknowledging the ritual. He began visiting the park every Sunday, sitting on the bench beneath the oak tree, her oak tree. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing faintly. Sometimes he would smile at them, other times, just listen, his hands folded, eyes closed. People often passed and wondered why he sat there so long. They didn't know he wasn't waiting anymore. He was keeping her company. One day, a young couple stopped by. They were newly married, full of the restless excitement he once had. The man complained softly about his job, the hours, the fatigue. The woman smiled and said, "It's only temporary." Richard looked at them for a moment, that fragile hope between them, the same kind he once carried. He wanted to tell them everything, about time, about love, about the silent costs that hide behind ambition. But he didn't. He simply said, "Make sure the person you're working for doesn't have to live without you while you're working for them." They smiled politely, not understanding. But one day maybe they would. That evening, he wrote his final letter to Helen. He placed it in a small wooden box beside the garden bed, her garden. The letter was short. "Helen, I kept my promise. I retired. But not in the way I planned. I retired from rushing. From noise. From proving. I finally sat still long enough to see what you saw all along, that love was never waiting at the end of work. It was in every moment I refused to slow down for." He folded the letter, sealed it, and placed a single rose on top. Then he sat down, breathing deeply, the kind of breath that comes when a burden quietly lifts. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The air was calm. The world felt complete, not perfect, not healed, but understood. In the end, he didn't find peace in wealth, or in freedom, or in rest. He found it in understanding that love never asks for more time, it only asks for presence. And maybe that's the moral of his story, that the real cost of wealth isn't what you spend, but what you miss while earning it. Because money can buy comfort, but it can't buy another morning with the person who waited for you. He promised they'd retire together. And in a way, they did. Just not in the world he expected. Don't wait to live the life you're working for. Because love, unlike money, doesn't grow with time. It fades when ignored.